soaring house prices to save Australia's economy. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I'm working through my stein of coffee when someone sent me a link to this article, and this is probably a good follow-up to the piece I did this morning for Peter Costello, our former treasurer, his opinion that Australia has been in a hidden recession for years. This is our current treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Remember him? He's the one that was hoping China's domestic demand for our resources would help keep Australia out of recession. He's optimistic that soaring house prices, you know that those results from one month, that little blip that's going up, that soaring house prices will get the Australian economy roaring again. So before we go to this article, let's just think about that. House prices. How do people buy their houses? How do normal people buy their houses? Well, they go to the bank and they get into debt. Okay? But Florian, that's just other money other people have deposited in the bank. No, it's not. It's an asset. Then that mortgage becomes an asset and the bank can use that to generate more revenue. And essentially the bank is creating that money out of thin air. Out of thin air. So there you go. Is this a way? Is this a way to stimulate the economy? It's concerning. If we go back here and I'll bring up this quote. I will bring up this quote from Matt Berry. This was his quote from his publication, his essay he wrote on LinkedIn. It's on Medium as well, where in 2016, 67% of Australia's GDP growth came from the cities of Sydney and Melbourne, and going down here, 24% of the country's entire GDP growth for 2016 was from one corridor in Sydney. Of the entire growth of the country in that year, a quarter of it nearly came from one corridor in Sydney. And think about that, these buildings, they're kind of, I would say in some ways they're a sugar hit to the economy, particularly apartment buildings. They're a sugar hit to the economy. Everyone likes them. They stimulate purchasing of retail goods, many of which are imported. But what is the ongoing productive capacity that they're adding to the civilization? They're providing housing for people, which is a fundamental need. But are they producing anything? They're producing a return for the owners, for the landlords. Hopefully that money will get spent in the economy and it will continue on. I'm not saying that's not a good, important part of the economy because it stimulates everything. Sure, there's ongoing maintenance requirements of these buildings. Probably more, given the state of buildings built in the last few years, sadly enough. But it's just, yes, it feels like a sugar hit. Having a Mars bar or a Snickers bar, as to keep you from the depressive hungers, to scare away hungers, but it's not going to be a long-term solution. Let's have a read of this article. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is optimistic. Soaring house prices will get the Australian economy rolling again, but experts aren't sold. Are you sold? Is anyone sold? I mean, is he even sold, or is he just talking it up because he has to? Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I don't know. We're seeing real estate agents are getting out of the property sector. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has told the property industry he's optimistic about the market outlook, claiming that a 10% increase could add as much 0.5% to the national GDP, or to the nation's GDP. While economists have downplayed the likelihood of such strong growth, Frydenberg cited steady population growth and waning supply as two factors that would continue supporting prices. Okay, so population growth. When we've been in a GDP per capita recession, it's just a Ponzi scam by bringing more and more people in. And the thing is, when you come in as an immigrant and you have your children and they grow up and become Australian, also then I'm an example of that, case in point. And then the older you get, there's only so much productive time you have before you need to get depend on the civilization, which is fine. That's expected, but you need to think about it in time frames. Because, well, with our culture here in Australia and the next generation, if they adopt more Western values, they're having less children. So then you've got to bring more people in. There's, you're running out of time. Well, it's and our infrastructure. The problem is the infrastructure isn't keeping pace with it. And the biggest one I'm constantly harping on about is our water supply. With 2 interest rate cuts already implemented and 2 more expected to come, the Reserve Bank of Australia has already warned of the danger of creating a housing bubble. Well, yes, the RBA is warning against a housing bubble. Frydenberg is hoping for a housing bubble, or counting on one, and he's hoping for Chinese domestic demand for our resources, when his budget is only in surplus because of iron ore prices being higher than they anticipated. Is it just dumb luck? I mean, so hold on to your hats. Australian Treasurer has just endorsed Australian housing prices to go much higher. Okay, speaking directly to the property industry on Thursday, Josh Frydenberg emphasized the attractiveness of soaring prices. Treasury estimates a 10% increase in house prices could lift GDP by 1%, he told AFR Property Summit in Sydney on Thursday, citing the strong link between changes in the property market and consumer behaviour. Okay, but that increase in house prices is going to mean an increase in a reduction in people's future spending capacity. Because remember, wages haven't gone up in a decade. What's going to drive them up in the next decade? They go on a big loan to buy a house that's now 10% more than he expects. That's 10% less money they're going to be able to spend, compounded by the interest cost of borrowing. Even though interest rates are still low, that's still less money they can spend in the future. While economists have poured cold water on the assumption that prices could lift by that margin in already unaffordable capital cities like Sydney and Melbourne, Frydenberg identified a few key drivers that could push them higher. Between 2005 and 2015, the population grew by 1.7% per year, or 3.7 million persons, the fastest average rate of growth in our population sustained over a 10-year period since the 70s, the Treasurer said. Okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because our housing now is not affordable to the normal people. I mean, guys, that's it. Its quality of life is getting worse. We've seen it. So meanwhile, the supply side looks to stay constrained in the short term. Dwelling investment is forecast in the 2019-2020 budget to fall by 7% in 2019-2020 and by a further 4% in 2020-2021 as existing projects are completed and recent weakness in building approvals flow through to activity, Frydenberg said. What about the complete lack of consumer confidence now in the construction sector? Okay, and there'll be another piece I'll probably look at tomorrow with regards to Mascot Towers, with some of the issues there that are just compounding. That could see prices again take off as supply lags and demand eats up any spare capacity in the market. A similar situation helped support price growth leading up to the market peak in 2017. Okay, let's have a look at the market in 2017. This is from the foreign investment in real estate collapses, and it's from the Foreign Investment Review Board. And this shows you here, the black line is the percentage of investment or building approvals that are for foreigners. Red is existing properties, and blue is new housing. So over 90% there. How high was that? And look at that crash. Look at that crash. It's insane. It is insane. So he's hoping that'll happen again. Look at all the dodgy buildings we got out of that, guys. This is the problem. So he's pinning all his hopes on that. Does that seem like a sensible plan? I mean, I would rather they look at ways to reduce the cost and burden that government places on us. Because that's what they are. They're a burden to all of us. We need to reduce it. So, that saw combined capital city prices increase by more than 50%, Frydenberg noted. While the ensuring positive wealth effect had a strong flow-on effect to the economy, it also shot the median house price in Sydney from 600 grand to $1 million, according to Treasury. Yes, it did. It did, and it was crazy. I mean, Just nuts. As wage growth grew by just a fraction of that rate, those same cities became enormously unaffordable at the same time that property investors profited. However, the relationship between high prices and the economy is not nearly as positive as the Treasurer has presented it to be, according to IFM Investors chief economist Alex Joyner, who said that the negative impact of the debt that pushes up those prices is so readily discounted. Yes, good one there, Alex. That is exactly the point that needs to be raised and that people need to be made aware of. Okay, fantastic. These prices are going up. Yes, we're all rich. But we're already also, there's a whole other generation of people that are stuck in a debt trap. A 1% increase in household debt lowers GDP growth in the long run by 0.1. And this impact intensifies as household debt to GDP exceeds 70%. Australia is at 120%, he tweeted. The implications for policymakers is clear, but seemingly ignored. There you go. There you go. It's insane. In other words, too much debt hurts the economy, not helps it. And yet, beside acknowledging that 80% of household debt is tied up in the property market, the Treasurer was silent on the potential consequences of increased debt. Instead, he indicated that the credit tap would again be turned on. Oh, fantastic. Clearly, the risk that the provision of credit may cause substantial hardship to some should not result in a significantly reduced ability to access credit by the vast majority of borrowers, Frydenberg said. It comes at the same time house prices look to be rising again after a couple of years of orderly declines. Given the key relationships between the health of the housing market and the wider economy, it is important that we continue to support the recovery that is underway, Frydenberg said. Certainly he and the Reserve Bank of Australia are doing their bit to stimulate the market, with the expectation of 2 further rate cuts only likely to add further fuel to the fire. Well, yes, it's crazy. I don't know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It just seems nuts. This stabilisation in the housing sector has occurred against the backdrop of the federal election, a continuation of strong jobs growth, the passage through the Parliament of the largest tax cut in more than 20 years that we're not going to see for another 5 years, and 2 interest rate cuts by the Reserve Bank, Frydenberg said. Strong jobs growth, unemployment's gone up. Unemployment went up to 5.3%. But, there you go. Noting that it typically takes around 1 to 2 years for the full effect of changes in monetary policy to flow through the economy, we should expect the 2 interest rate cuts by the Reserve Bank to continue to support demand for housing, he said, adding he was optimistic about the market. However, with household debt already at eye-watering levels, it's not clear whether higher prices could continue to flow through the economy. Pointing to the same pressures on households, AMP chief economist Shane Oliver has previously told Business Insider Australia that any subsequent bounce in major markets will be more modest. As affordability wallows in capital cities, there will be many who will hope Oliver is right. Well, what do you think, guys? Do you think Frydenberg is hoping? I mean, what else? Seriously, what else can he say? What else can he say? Maybe he could say, to help facilitate the economy, we are removing this tax, this tax, this tax, this tax. We are shrinking non-essential burdens on the population. But then again, there'll be a lot of people, a lot of rent seekers who wouldn't appreciate that. Let me know what you think, guys. What would you do? Take care, and I'll talk to you later.